Today I'm talking about the good things and the bad things in the United States Army. What's up, friends? In this episode, I am covering some of the pros and cons to being in the United States Army. A lot of people ask questions. They want to know, what are the benefits to being in the United States Army? What are the bad things? Especially maybe things that a recruiter isn't going to tell you. And hopefully that kind of satisfies that kind of curiosity of what kind of things are an Army recruiter probably not going to tell me about because they want me to join. So in this video, I'm going to do my best to kind of cover, in my personal opinion, some of the pros and the cons, the good and the bad with being in the United States Army. Now, before we get started, a lot of this mainly refers to active duty Army, reserves, National Guard. It's a little bit more relaxed on certain things, so some of the pros or some of the cons may not actually translate in the same way that I'm talking about in this video because my experience is with being active duty Army. Now, I'm actually going to start off with the cons because that's probably one of the main things that people want to know about. A lot of people probably already know about some of the, pros, some of the good side of being in the United States Army, but a lot of people may not be very familiar with some of the bad things that go along with being in the United States Army. So the first one is going to be the pay. Now, at least for starting off, when you are first starting off in the United States Army, if you are a single soldier, you don't have any college or anything like that, and you're just coming right off out of high school into the Army, the pay is pretty low. There's other benefits that kind of go along with that pay, but I'm just talking about actual money in your bank account. The pay is fairly low for single soldiers just starting off as a private coming into the Army and have less than 2 years in the United States Army. So to give you an idea of that pay, it is roughly $1,500 a month, and that is before taxes, however. But however, soldiers get paid twice a month on the 1st and the 15th of the month, so that basically roughly comes out to $750 per paycheck. Now, if you wanted to kind of compare that to, let's say, a civilian job who works hourly and works roughly usually 40 hours per week, your average kind of type of job, well, that ends up being only a little bit over $9 an hour that person is getting paid. That's pretty low. In some states, that's not even minimum wage. Of course, there are other benefits to that pay, but like I said, I'm just only talking about actual physical money in your bank account. That's all you're going to end up getting when you're first starting off as an enlisted soldier in the United States Army. Also, kind of along with that, kind of goes, if let's say Soldier A is a private and they're in 11 Bravo, risking their life, going on raids while they're deployed, kicking in doors and all that stuff. And then Soldier B is also a private, but they work in finance and just kind of make sure that people's pay isn't jacked up and do some of that budgeting. Those people get paid exactly the same, even though maybe one person has a much more dangerous job than the other person. Maybe one person is working harder than the other person. If they're the same rank, they make the same pay. It doesn't matter how hard you work or how dangerous your job is. If you are the same rank as somebody else who has a not at all dangerous job or a very easy job, you're still making the same pay. So a lot of people could look at that as definitely a big disadvantage when you're first starting off in the military. As you get a little bit farther in the military, maybe 3 years in the Army, 4 years in the Army, you get up there in rank, or if you're an officer, the pay gets a little bit better, but you're probably still not gonna be big ballin', expecting to be living in a mansion probably anytime soon until you get to maybe the rank of a general if you're lucky to get up that high. Then you make some really good money. So another disadvantage to being in the United States Army is really long hours. That means early mornings and late nights a lot of times. There are some cases where maybe you do very little work, where maybe you're only at work for a few hours and then you get cut loose, but I would say I had more late days than I did have early days. So that means getting up super early to do physical training, work all day, sometimes stuck in the motor pool, stuck doing missions, stuck doing whatever until late at night. And it doesn't matter how many hours you work because you're still making the same pay. It relates a little bit to that last kind of con as well, but the main thing is sometimes you have some really long hours that you're having to work and you're not getting paid anything extra for working those extra hours. Along with that is also like weekends, especially like if you're doing training, if you're on duty, like having to man a desk for like CQ or staff duty or something like that. And those ones are 24-hour shifts. So you don't get paid anything extra for doing those 24-hour shifts. You'll get the next day off, but nothing extra in pay really. So that is another disadvantage. Sometimes there are some really long nights. Sometimes you get off normal time. Sometimes you have to work weekends and you're pretty much always on call. The next con or disadvantage is being away from home. Now that means, being away from family, from your hometown. If you're a single soldier, you're gonna have to go off to another base. If you're lucky enough to be stationed nearby, cool, but a lot of people are not that lucky, and they'll be stationed on the other side of the United States, maybe stationed in another country, and only get to see maybe family once, twice, 3 times a year, not what you're used to when you're like in high school or something like that. And then you have those soldiers that are married. You bring your families with you, sure, but you're still gonna have to do training. You have like these field problems that maybe last 1 week, 2 week, a month, or whatever, and you're away from your wife, your husband, your children for those couple of weeks, for those months, to do this training exercise that you have to participate in. And then if you end up in a situation where you have to deploy, well, then you're also away from them for maybe 6 months or a year. Back in my day, you also had 15-month deployments. I think they've kind of gone away from that. But with current deployments, maybe 6 months or a year, you're gonna have to be away from your family, whether you are single or you are married, of being away from them for that deployment. And along with that, they're like, especially with married soldiers, they miss out on some key moments. Now, typically if your spouse, is expecting a child, they'll let you go back to be able to be there for the birth of your child, but then you're back at it. You're back at that deployment. You're back to that field problem. And that causes sometimes soldiers to miss key events, first steps, first word, maybe the first day of school, big band recitals or big games that they're participate in, and it's kind of a very discouraging to some family members to miss out on some of those key moments of their children sometimes. Another con is you are pretty much, for the most part, when you are a lower enlisted soldier, treated like a kid. Mainly this goes to like I would say like privates, private first class, single soldiers, maybe some married soldiers in like, those cases of being privates and private first class for certain situations, because things like living in the barracks for single soldiers, they try to usually separate the men and the women, and they don't want you really going to those areas. Sometimes some units will have it to where, this floor is off limits to men unless you're on duty or something like that, or you're that person's squad leader or something like that. Some units will have those restrictions, and it's kind of ridiculous because, you're over 18, you're an adult. Why am I not allowed to go visit these females, that are in my unit? But some units are kind of picky like that. Not all of them, but some are pretty picky with that. But also along with that, they're picky about other things too. If you're a young private in the Army and you want to go buy a car, most units aren't just going to say, yeah, sure, go, talk to your dealership or whatever. They're probably going to give you some kind of counseling that kind of sits you down with someone in your leadership to tell you about, how to manage your money properly and not go and buy some car that you can't afford. Or in some cases, units will send you with your squad leader to basically supervise you while you're, trying to pick out this car and talking to this finance person about what you can and can't afford for the car, so you don't get over your head with some crazy, ridiculous car payment. And some people may find that ridiculous. I'm 18, I'm 20 years old, whatever, and I have to have someone chaperone me to go buy a car. But that's kind of how it is in the United States Army. Sometimes it's to look out for you, to help, some people who need it, to keep them from getting in over their head on a large car payment they can't afford. And, some people aren't going to like that. And there are a lot of other situations that, when you're a low-ranking soldier, you don't have a lot of the, freedom that you would think you would have for being an 18, 19, 20-year-old, adult in the military. They're going to be holding your hand through certain things, treating you like a kid to make sure you don't screw yourself over. And it's fairly for your own good, but it really does feel like you're just being treated like a kid. So those are the cons. Now let's jump into some of the pros to being in the United States Army. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the benefits. The benefits are a very big deal, and that ties a little bit into kind of offsetting some of the cons for like low pay when you're first coming into the Army, because things are paid for you. So yeah, you're getting low pay, so you don't have a whole lot in your bank account, but you're also not having to spend money on food because you have the chow hall. You're not having to spend money on health insurance because medical is all taken care of. And then it also goes for individuals with families. So if they have a wife, you have a husband, you have children, the medical is taken care of. If you have a spouse that is pregnant, then you're gonna be able to have that child at no cost because it is covered in the medical with the United States Army. Also, additionally to that is education benefits. If you want to go to school while you're in the Army, they'll pay for some of that stuff. If when you get out of the Army, you want to go to school, they have benefits for that to be able to get an education. And if you don't want to use that, you can transfer it over to your children if you have children. And then you also have retirement. So if a soldier wants to stay in for 20-something years, maybe they get out of the Army as a 41-year-old, 42-year-old, whatever the case might be, depending on when they join the Army and when they're actually retiring, they can retire and collect that retirement check right away, where most people in the civilian world have to wait until they're 65. Now, that's only really available with active duty. It is different for National Guard and reserves, and they're even thinking about trying to change it for active duty to where you wouldn't be able to collect that money, or maybe only a portion of it, until you turn 65. But I think as of right now, you can still collect your retirement check as soon as you retire from the Army. So if you're 45 years old, you're collecting a retirement check. So that's another big benefit kind of along with those benefits. And then along with it as well, even if you don't retire or you do retire, you have these VA benefits. So if you had some kind of injury from being in the military, they try to take care of you from medical. They give you, some money because you're getting paid extra for those benefits based on those injuries that are related to your service time in the military or in the Army. And even veterans can, utilize the VA healthcare system. It's not health insurance, but if you have some kind of sickness or illness or injury or whatever, and you want to be seen by a VA doctor, you can usually do so for little to no cost. So sure, like I said, with the cons, the pay is pretty low, but those benefits sometimes, in some cases, offset some of that. So you're not having to spend extra money on those things, but you still don't have that money in the bank account. That's why I still have it as a con. But to offset it, you have these benefits of those education, the food for single soldiers, and all that stuff. So the next pro that I'll talk about is job training and experience. That can be very useful. Someone who especially wants to get into a very technical field, maybe something to do with satellites, something to do with radar, a lot of different other jobs in the Army that maybe in the civilian world may require an education before you can even get into that field, where you can come in out of high school and start learning how to do this job and work your way up through it and build that experience, and then get out of the Army and maybe do it in the civilian world if it's something you really enjoyed, where other civilians may have had to have gone to college to learn how to do this before they even got a job doing that type of field. And often, just simply being a veteran, even if you're not doing the job that you did in the Army and you want to do something else when you get out of the Army, being a veteran sometimes just helps you to get a job. A lot of employers like having people who have that structure of the military, that responsibility, and hopefully, as long as you weren't like a screw up in the Army, they're hoping that you're going to, carry over some great discipline from the Army into this civilian job, and you're, really impress this employer. So employers like, hiring veterans because of those reasons, because they're looking for someone who's responsible, who's reliable, hopefully, and, has that discipline that the Army instills in an individual. So another pro is travel. For a lot of individuals, they get a chance to see a lot of places. But I also know a lot of people that did like just one initial contract of 4 years and stayed at one duty station in the United States and didn't go anywhere else. But for some other people, like for example me, I went to Kansas, to Korea, to Kuwait. Iraq really wasn't that great, but I still got some experience out of it and got to see that part of the world. And then of course Colorado, where I decided to stay. So I got to see, some good areas. A lot of other people get to see things like, Germany and Italy and all sorts of other countries that they got to go on assignment with. So the ability to be able to hopefully go to these different locations, see different parts of the United States or different parts of the world is a big advantage, I think. It's an experience that not a lot of people get. Some people get out of high school and just stay in that same city they grew up in, get a job, raise a family there, and don't see, a whole lot of the world outside of that, city or that surrounding area, where someone who serves in the Army or even the military for that matter, a lot of times gets to see quite a bit of the United States, some cases, maybe parts of the world, if they got to get out and get around and see other duty stations and weren't just kind of cooped up at one duty station for their entire contract. The next pro that I'm including into this is fitness. You have to do physical fitness every morning, so there's a good chance, as long as you're not cheating yourself, that you're going to be able to stay in great shape. Now, since I got out of the Army, I've gotten fairly out of shape, and I'm working on getting back into shape. But while I was in the Army, I was in great shape, and a lot of people in the Army usually are, unless you have some instances where people just have a hard time keeping weight off or whatever the case might be, sometimes just being lazy. But for the most part, you have a great opportunity to stay in good shape because you're doing physical fitness every morning. You have gyms on post that are free for soldiers to go attend. They have great equipment, usually all sorts of running and weights and a sauna and a pool and a track and all sorts of things that soldiers can utilize on their off time to also use to stay in shape. This allows individuals in the military and in the Army to be in excellent condition, be in excellent shape, and you're really required to do so. I mean, you have to do a physical fitness test, every at least 6 months, or maybe sometimes sooner for some units. But you have to, maintain that kind of fitness level, and it kind of forces you to try to stay in shape. So that's also another good advantage to being in the military, is probably being in good health and in good shape. So for those of you watching, if you are currently in the military or previously served in the military, what are some pros and cons that you can think of? Because there are obviously more than just what I'm talking about. These are just the ones that I wanted to bring to light in this video. There are several others that I can think of, but for time purposes, I won't include every single thing I can possibly think of. So help me out in the comments and leave some that you can think of down below. If you are not in the military, thinking about joining the military, just curious about the military, and you have questions about different things, make sure to leave some comments down below and I'll try to help you out, or some of my other fellow viewers, we have some information that can help you out. Maybe they can answer. I'm sure one of the comments, probably from like a veteran or active duty person, is going to be about like leadership being really crappy at places or something like that, but that's really no different in the military compared to civilian world. I mean, if you have a job at Walmart or somewhere else, you know, you still can have just as big of a chance of having a supervisor really screw you over as much of a chance as you can have a NCO, a sergeant, or somebody in the military screw you over. So that's nothing different from the military, but I'm sure someone will probably, you know, say something about it in the comments, how, you know, leadership can suck at different duty stations they've been to. But that's my video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. If you want to check out some of my links for social media and everything, those are available down in the description, as well as a link to the Patreon to join the Chaos Army and receive more than what I currently offer on my YouTube channel. If you want to check out some more of my videos, I got a couple right over there that I highly recommend. If you are not subscribed to my channel and you want to make sure you catch more of my content, make sure you hit that subscribe button and also hit that bell so you get notifications, especially for my live streams. Thanks so much for watching. I'm ThatChrisChaos, and I will see you next time. See ya.